It was a revolution for me. It was a game changer because I finally had the language to explain what I already knew to be true in my life. Previously, I always felt like I was essentially trying to explain to people why I was different or defending myself in some way because I went about doing things differently than other people. Hey, it's Richard Canfield. I'm a Kolbe certified consultant here, and I'm coming to talk to you a little bit about what this Kolbe A Index is. Now, I am walking on a treadmill. I'll explain why that is because it actually has to do a little bit with my own Kolbe. Kolbe has to do with our natural instincts. It's how we go about getting things done in the world. So, when you're given a problem, what is the method and the way that you, by instinct, naturally strive forward to go and tackle that particular set of problems? And there's a way that you'll do it. You won't even realize you're doing it because it's by instinct. It's natural. It's built into you fundamentally, and it doesn't change over your lifespan. Kolbe is the only assessment that actually measures what's called conation. There's three parts of the mind. There's the affective, which is, feelings and that sort of thing. Cognitive, which is learned behavior, learned skills, knowledge, intellect. And then there's conation or conative. Conative isolates instinct, the power of our instinctual nature. Think about a lion. A lion chases a gazelle, eats the gazelle. It does that by instinct. It doesn't need a lot of training to know how to do that. It's built into the DNA of that particular animal. Well, as unique individuals, we have a unique Kolbe, and there's a way that we go about through instinct tackling problems. Another person might have a totally different way, and if you're given the same problem, you might achieve the same result, but you'll want to go about getting there two different ways. That's the key that we focus on. So I'm going to walk through an example of a Kolbe. I'll use mine as an example, and then we'll talk about what this means and how it can benefit you. Okay, so here we go. I'm going to bring it up on the screen. All right, so you should see a Kolbe A Index. So the Kolbe A Index is what we want. That's our primary thing. It's all developed by Kathy Kolbe. Unfortunately, at the time of this recording, the late Kathy Kolbe, she passed away very recently, was an amazing human being. She's really revolutionized my life and thousands and thousands of people, both kids, gifted individuals, entrepreneurs, and so forth. And so I first took my Kolbe Index in 2013. It was a revolution for me. It was a game changer because I finally had the language to explain what I already knew to be true in my life. Previously, I always felt like I was essentially trying to explain to people why I was different or defending myself in some way because I went about doing things differently than other people. I would hear things like, Richard, why can't you just complete one task at one time? Why can't you just finish this off? Why do you have all these unfinished projects? Richard, why are you always showing up just in the nick of time or a couple of minutes late? Richard, why is your room a mess? Like, I heard these things on a regular basis. And it wasn't that I didn't try dealing with those things, but what I realize is that by instinct, I'm driven to do things a certain way, and I get great results. I get actually amazing results most areas of my life doing it my way. I don't need to do it someone else's way to get exceptional results. And that is also true for you if you understand what your way is. So this is an example of learning what your way is, isolating it, and then it creates this amazing communication tool that you can have with important people in your life. Maybe it's a boss, a business partner, a spouse, life partner, your children. And most likely when you're thinking about your children have a unique and different way. There's something called, used to be called the Kolbe Youth Index. It's now called an aptitude test. And it's not really a test, it's an assessment. That assessment produces a great insight into the potential superpowers of your own child. Okay, so highly encourage people to get that done. But I'll walk through this really quickly just to give you an insight as to how Kolbe A shows up. Again, just using mine as an example. And what you'll see here is everyone gets a perfect score, just so you know. It says, Richard, you're terrific at stepping into tough situations, concocting daring solutions, making the seemingly impossible possible. You lead the way out of dilemmas as you blaze uncharted trails and improvise inventions to get them working. And then there's these areas here. There's these four primary areas. And these bars are measured on a scale of 1 to 10. And there's no good or bad. There's only amazing. It doesn't matter where you land, what your numbers are. That number is amazing for you. It's natural. Okay, so there's no high or low. There's simply a number that gives you a measuring stick on where you're at. Okay. And so I'm going to use a couple of lines here real quick. So we have this 1 to 3 zone, and then we have a 4 to 6 zone, and then we have a 7 to 10 zone. So anything in this 7 to 10 zone means that you initiate action there. That's where you'll put a high degree of energy, and you're higher, relatively speaking, in that category. And then what does that mean? So you can see here, I have an 8 in an area called quick start. Quick start is a measurement of how we deal with risk and uncertainty. So I'm much more adept at that. I'm designed to improvise, do things on the fly, go off the cuff, race the clock, do things at the last minute. That's what you start to see, that kind of energy. And I start my problem solving process there. It might seem a little chaotic to other people, but for me, it's actually energizing. So I don't use a lot of prep work to do things. In fact, this video, zero prep work. I just hit the record button and here we go. Okay. And then we have fact finder, follow through, and implementer. So fact finder is how you gather information and how you relay information. So it's a combination of taking information in and passing it on to other people. So how do you do that? So if you're in this higher zone, 7 to 10, you likely do a lot more research. You'll really like the written word. You'll probably take a ton of notes. You'll want to read more. You'll want to go in depth. You want to get into the specifics. It's very common for people in that area to say things like, when asked a question, well, it depends, because it depends on the specifics and the information. Maybe I don't have all the information to give you the proper answer. There may be hesitancy to give an answer without having all the details and the data available. Okay, so there's a common trend that people often find themselves where they may be recurringly ending up in analysis paralysis in that area. It's not good or bad. It's just awareness as to how that shows up. Whereas in the category where I'm at, in a 3, this is in a simplify zone. So my role and my effort is to simplify information, get down to the core elements, get down to the core components, relay that in, bite-sized chunks as an example. And both of these are good. It doesn't mean that I can't get into the weeds and be very data-oriented and specific also. In some categories, I really, really can. So anyone can do anything from this zone to this zone. It's a continuum. That means that your energy can accomplish anything on a 1 to 10 scale. Anybody can do that. But if I want to spend a lot of time in data research zone, or if I have a job or a vocation that involves that, I'm going to develop mental and energy burnout because I'm not designed instinctually to do that all the time. It uses a lot more of my energy to do that effort. I can do it, but it takes a ton of energy. The same thing applies to this follow-through category. Follow-through category is how you systemize and organize. Systemize and organize. So down here is very staccato, logical, step-by-step, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It's very in order. You'll prioritize and then do things in that order and check it off the list first. Whereas here in the 3 category, this is adapt. It's do things at random, do things differently. A little bit more probably chaos. As if you saw my desk around me, you'd see there's stuff everywhere. There's no order to any of it. I need to have things physically within reach for me, which is a combination of this follow through energy and the implementer over here. Okay. Talk quickly. I'll skip over to implementer because we talked about quick start briefly. Implementer is interesting that it deals with not that you're the ability to implement something, but your physical use of implements. So here as an example, I have, a fidget spinner. I have a tape measure randomly on my desk. Why is that? I don't know. I love tape measures. I usually have one around. Former construction background, can't help myself. I'm literally standing on a treadmill right now. I'm engaging my physical body. My brain actually thinks better through physical motion. That's part of what, this indicates to some degree. So if you're in this 1 to 3 zone up in here, then a person in this category is less likely to own a lot of tools, hand tools, screwdrivers, drills, physical things. They're going to be more geared to mental pictures and images and speaking in visions and images and word pictures and using that type of language. It's very visual oriented. And as you cross that zone to get into the 4 to 6 range, your need to start to use physical things. So you might be an avid cook. You might get that energy out by mixing up ingredients and testing things in the kitchen. You may renovate, repair things, do a lot of like renovation projects, work with wood, that sort of thing. And then if you're in the higher category, we see a lot of things who are like surgeons here, people building very tactile things, and they need high quality, 3D realm oriented. So the higher on that scale we go, the more necessity for 3D elements, physical engagement. A person like this, if they're an engineer, they need to get out and go onto the site and see it in the 3D and get off the paper and get to the 3D zone as soon as possible. That's the type of thing that you see happening in there. So there's a bit of a high level on these Kolbe modes. Now, why do I want to share this? I want to go through a couple quick elements, and then we'll certainly engage in this. I encourage everyone gets a Kolbe A. It really did change my life in a ton of ways. And I'll just give you some insights. So I'm going to scroll past some of this, but I want to highlight these areas where we get these contable tips. These boxes are absolutely unique to your Kolbe MO, your mode of operation, your modus operandi. Okay. So questions like, why are you so random? Why don't you just stick with the plan? I used to get questions like that and variations of it all the time. And I didn't have the language and the words to say. I get better results when I try a variety of things, and I get more done when I take shortcuts. Hearing that out loud, if you're watching this, that might seem very strange and very odd to you. And I would suggest that it's not logical. It doesn't fit in a logical pattern. People will often say things, just focus on one thing at one time. And people would say that to me, and I'd be like, but I can't do that. And it's not that I couldn't do it. It's that I didn't want to do it. And by instinct, it felt wrong to me. It doesn't mean it doesn't work for most people or a lot of people. It just isn't Richard's MO. It's not my mode of operation. And so having the language to properly reflect back and communicate what I needed to be successful really started to change the game for me. And if I was a kid, a child, a teenager, if I would have had this, I think I could have advocated for myself a lot better in the school system, could have advocated for myself a lot better with my parents. My parents were amazing and they gave me free reign. So I was able to do what I needed to do without a lot of great oversight. It's one of the advantages of being an 80s kid. But today, it's less of an environment where we can let our kids out into that measure of freedom without certain risks available to them in a current world. So we need to find ways to create this if a person is, as an example, like Richard. So I'll scroll down and look at another one. These again, contable tips, do's and don'ts. Do's are great, but the don'ts are just as important, because if you can understand how to do less of these things in your day-to-day life, day-to-day world, it'll actually improve your energy. You'll have less burnout. So now you're trying to find leverage to have another person or technology or a who or AI start to do these things for you so you can spend more time doing the things that are totally natural for you using your instinct. This 3 fact finder, in my opinion, is a superpower. To the same degree that someone who's a 7 or an 8, and I know lots of them and they're amazing people, they have a superpower that I don't have. It's not that I can't tap into it, but it takes me a lot of effort to tap into it. I would much rather stay in my zone right here where I know I kill it every single time. Okay. Scroll down, follow through. Again, this one really stuck out for me a lot. Looking at the don'ts. Don't stick with step-by-step procedures, repeat patterns. Be overly scheduled and succumb to rigid routines. I always felt stressed when I was in a routine, when I had to be someplace at some time all the time, and it was always the same. It was so consistent. And I would find ways, shortcuts in my life to manipulate that and mix it up and change it. And I didn't realize I was doing it, and to some degree creating chaos in my life, but measured chaos that allowed me to be more myself. So it didn't mean that everything was chaotic. It just meant that I needed to have this type of change in my life in order to have my brain activated, to be creative, to do things and be engaged mentally. So I didn't feel like I was a robot. That was really, really important with me. And what that means is I need to try things randomly. I need to do multiple projects. I actually need to multitask, which is, again, not something particularly recommended for most people to be successful. That can create a bit of chaos. And so we're not suggesting everyone do that. That's just what works for me. So understanding what works for you is a critical element. Deal with tasks as they arise. Well, that's a big one for me. I do that all the time. And if I can't do it when it arises, often that task gets put on the back burner and never gets activated again. So I need to have someone to help me follow through on things, to capture those ideas, those uncompleted tasks, and make sure they get revived at a later date so that I can do it when it arises again. And that's where having an assistant is really helpful for me to help manage some of that. And AI is playing a nice role in the modern world. Okay. In the quick start zone, high quick start individuals, especially initiating quick start individuals like myself, there's a drive and a need to race the clock. That's a very big one. I know a lot of entrepreneurs like this. and it's a critical element to actually creating success. Experiment doing things at the last minute. Again, not recommended for all people. And I think in the modern world, in a corporate setting, in a school setting, we would actually indicate that that's not quote unquote a successful path. And so the world around us tries to indicate that that's not maybe the best way of doing things. And because of that, it's trying to often force people like Richard in this category into a bit of a box. And then that creates stress. And you want to break free from that box in some way. And that creates a lot of mental burden and sometimes even physical burden, because it's literally like a physical, I just got to break free, I got to get out of here sort of an environment. So understanding that and starting to see that in people can be really beneficial if you know that that's the case. And there's ways to activate this power in a really positive way to create massive exponential change in businesses and so forth. Okay. So again, do's and don'ts really important. A pyramid of energy is fantastic. How much energy units you have, I won't go into a lot of detail there. Sense of time. This is what's really critical here. When free to use your strengths. Often we put ourselves in life in positions where we are not free to use these strengths. We recognize them. We know that we should in some way, but we don't know how to quantify it. We don't necessarily have the words to describe what we need because we aren't certain. We have a feeling and an awareness, and we know that when we hit a wall or we're doing something that doesn't feel right, there's an energy that's there that says, you really just don't want to do it this way, but this is the way I'm told to do it and I have to do it. That type of a feeling. When that's the case, it's running into a level of friction. And it doesn't mean that you can, again, if you're working for an employer or something, you can just bust out of that. You might have to follow the rules. But if you have this kind of language, you might be able to communicate a way that you can accomplish the same objective, but doing it the way that works best for you so that you maintain your energy. In fact, you might invigorate your energy and create more energy rather than less. And so if you ever have that feeling, there's a good chance, it could be sleep. Maybe you need more sleep. Okay. But a lot of times it's because you're working against your grain. And then that creates a squandering element of your energy. Okay. So for me, I need to start a problem solving process with brainstorming, coming up with ideas, spitballing, getting it all out, doing it on the fly, vocalizing it out loud, and actually having people involved in the discussion is really helpful for me. Brainstorming with other people is really critical for me personally. Next, check the strength and durability materials. In other words, what are we going to use to build it? How are we building it? Are we using a tool, a program, platform? What are we going to do? Then summarize and clarify the bottom line, get it down to brass tacks. Once we have a plan and idea in place that we want to move forward on, now let's look at what we might have missed. What's another way that we could do this? Can we spitball a better way now that we have a framework to come up with even other alternatives? And then we might be able to choose an alternative that's even better once we've isolated one that we know will work. That's kind of my model that works really, really well for me. Okay. Again, lots of other benefits here. The truth is you need to vary your activities to keep your mind to engaged. And this one sentence right here, almost 12 years ago, changed my life. A good way to start your day is to decide what you're not going to do today. I'd never heard anything like that before. And it made so much sense to me that it was liberating to realize that I could even do that. Everyone has a to-do list. My to-do list turned into a mile long. I kept adding things. It was chaotic. It was on the random sheets of paper. I would lose those pieces of paper and then forget the things I was supposed to be doing. Nothing was in order. The things that seemed more important at the time, I would write in bigger letters or I would go over it again to make it bold. And so I didn't have an order. I didn't reorder the page like some people might. I simply had a chaotic page on a random sheet, often at an angle or the corner or a back of an envelope, whatever was physically available to me at the moment. A cardboard box, a piece of wood. I used to be an electrician. I had coveralls. I would write these things on my coveralls in a black marker. That's how much I needed to get the stuff out of my head right away. What I didn't realize is that I could write down a bunch of those things and I can make a decision about the things that I'm not going to touch. And that has been a game changer in my life. So knowing your Kolbe A Index can revolutionize your life to a large degree. It did it for me, and I'm hoping it can do it for you. If you want to understand your Kolbe, as a certified Kolbe consultant, I'm more than happy to have that consult with you. You can go to my website. You can go to coachcanfield.com, learn more about that. And we can really unpack what is your natural superpower? How do you activate and find ways to communicate what you need to keep that energy high recognizing when your energy wanes based on doing things that are outside of your MO, your instinct, and then how can you get other people around you on the same page? These are critical elements to creating the most amount of happiness and success in your life. If you're a parent and you have kids, if you can start to understand the power of Kolbe for you at the you level, it becomes much more engaging and easier to start to recognize and see things in your children that you might be able to now try some different things and realize there's a reason they probably don't do it your way. And you might be creating tension unnecessarily because we're trying to force our children into a box of what worked for you rather than what might work for them. And we don't even know yet until we discover. So that student aptitude program is a great way to start to discover this. It has a similar colored bars. It doesn't provide the numbers, but it gives the same elements. And as a parent, you can get additional parent resources to start to learn how to find ways of creating the right environment and setting the right positions in place to help make your kids successful. So, Richard Canfield here. So happy you're learning about the Kolbe A Index, about a game-changing assessment that I really do believe fundamentally everyone should have. And what it can do for you in your powerful future is just uncanny. So can't wait to hear about what your Kolbe A is, have a chance to talk to you about it, and see how we can maximize your natural superpowers. Thanks.